Arvid Lindblad has joined the list of F2 feature race winners at only 17 years of age and might just end up as a title contender after all. Hello and welcome fellow motorsports fans. The Formula 2 Championship battle is still incredibly wide open, but with almost half the season behind us already, we still have to get another close look at what is going on in a season with about 6 or 7 realistic title contenders, along with all the other single-seater action of course. So let's get straight to it. In Formula 3, Van Amersfoort Racing was the surprise of the weekend for me, qualifying in the top 12 with all 3 cars and ending the weekend with a podium for Santiago Ramos and Teo Final. And even Dominguez scoring his first points of the season by winning the sprint race. Sure, huge caveat with that, and I'll get there in a moment, but can't take anything away from Dominguez, even if I still reckon he is probably the weakest driver on his team. I still recommend everybody to keep a close eye on Teo Final. Guy is both rapid and knows how to get an overtake done. The sprint start was of course a proper mess, with Tim Tramnitz making his first real mistake of the season, but a big one at that, by wiping out himself, Matthias Stenshorn and Roman Belinsky for a rare top 3 takedown in one move. It's been a while since I've seen one of those. Surprisingly, his championship hasn't suffered too much from that, thanks to a generally huge amount of incidents all around. To be honest, I do still appreciate what he was trying to do in that turn 1, even if it went horribly wrong. MP teammate Alessandro Giusti has by now firmly established himself as the second man in the team, considering Bruno Del Pino remains incredibly hit or miss, particularly on Friday. Giusti now has his first podium to boast and is actually the man with the longest standing scoring streak on the grid right now, definitely rivaling Tramnitz in the consistency department. No doubt big things to come from the Williams Jr. Looking at the title battle, Rafa Camara may have forgotten his glasses in the sprint, but did make up for it with another clean and easy feature win. It is a bit ridiculous at this stage, to be honest. Nikola Zolov should have given him a much better run for his money though, but ruined himself with a poor getaway. So far, Zolov is always just falling short of the greatness we've all kind of been hoping for. His talent is of course undeniable, but he doesn't look as complete a driver as you'd hope for from a third year. Meanwhile, Tuukka Taponen had a shocking weekend, wrecked off the line by Camara in the sprint and with another mechanical issue in the feature after running well in the lead pack. The win will surely come at some point, but it looks like we'll have to wait just a little bit longer. I can't be bothered to say much about the Dufek-Carrasquedo swap. Both are a little forgettable at this level I reckon. I just hope Carrasquedo causes less incidents. Instead, a quick shout out for James Wharton. The season may have been super disappointing so far and he was still firmly the worst of the ART trio this weekend, but does now at least have some points on the board. Definitely expecting more of that going forward. Formula 2 really just keeps on delivering, at least when we're talking about the incredibly open championship battle. The races themselves were both slightly ruined by ill-timed safety cars. Alex Dunn and Richard Verschoor find themselves back on top of the table, albeit aided by the sprint race strategy lack. And both look like proper title threats, no doubt about that. I still don't think MP is quite good enough to actually help Verschoor to the title, but Dunn certainly looks like he is his own biggest enemy. If he can avoid more penalty chaos going forward, he absolutely has both the pace and the overtaking skills to win this championship, but there are so many more contenders. Arvid Lindblad has found his first feature win in F2, did so in dominant fashion, has been on a scoring streak since the very first sprint race in Melbourne, and is now P3 in the standings, less than 10 points off the lead. I think we can't call him the favourite yet, if we can even call anybody a favourite at this stage, but him winning would certainly be the most poetic and exciting storyline that could come out of this season, getting him into F1 with the maximum possible momentum. Either way, Lindblad is going to be a future F1 star, no doubt about it in my mind. Jack Crawford is also in excellent form since we've made it to Europe, super consistent at the sharp end and looking very mature while doing so, although that would of course be somewhat expected from a third-year driver. And importantly for me personally, he did make up for his free win in Monaco, considering he did get robbed by the late safety car and the damn strategy in the sprint race. There may be a surprising lack of driver rumours surrounding Cadillac so far, but I know who I'd be looking at as an American team. And two shoutouts to end this segment on. First, Sebastian Montoya for showing both his best and worst side this weekend, wrecking into Gabriel Mini during the sprint and controlling P2 from start to finish in the feature. His pace is considerably better than I had anticipated going into the season, I have to admit, but he still has a lot of issues to sort out. If he ends up returning next year, he should be a proper title threat. And second, Rita Mumiata for finally looking good again in Formula 2, ironically more or less the first time since this very track last season. Sure, he did get absolutely robbed in the sprint, but did show both pace and some rather aggressive flashy racing, truly driving like a man with a lot of confidence. All in all, a lot closer to the Miata us Super Formula fans had been expecting all along. F1 delivered at Barcelona. I always loved the tyre strategy shenanigans at that track, and while there is of course a lot of talk about the McLaren dominance, Verstappen's incident drama, a Hülkenberg P5 and Alonso finally scoring a point, I want to use this segment to briefly talk about Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari, as we haven't really done that so far this year. This season has been thoroughly underwhelming so far, quite obviously so, and frankly, I think it is a bit shocking how big the gap to Leclerc can be at times. While Leclerc is having a Russell-esque season of maximizing what he's got, Hamilton is looking a lot more like Kimi Antonelli. And while I'm not awfully happy with Kimi so far, he does of course have the greatest excuse ever of literally being an 18-year-old with only 3 years behind the wheel of a Formula car under his belt. An excuse the 7-time world champion obviously can't really bring to the table. It does really make you wonder a little. Is Hamilton washed or just really struggling with this particular Ferrari? Of course, I don't have the answer. We'll probably get that next year, but I'd still love to hear your opinion about that down below. Formula E produced two rather different looking races with one standard and one soaking wet race, but they did have one thing in common. Championship dominator Ollie Rowland not just without a win, but without a podium for the first time since the season opener. He did of course run a good but not great race in the dry, potentially just burning through his energy a tad too early to keep track position at the end, but was absolutely nowhere to be found in the wet. Caveat being that Nissan teammate Norman Nato was even further down the order in the wet, so I reckon it is safe to say Nissan wasn't exactly good in those conditions. But I think it might also tell us that Rowland's biggest strength is indeed the execution of the particular Formula E style races, something that is considerably different in the wet. Not to say he is bad in the wet, of course, he's got a Monaco result to prove that wrong this year alone. Nick Cassidy finally on the top step of a podium again after a huge streak of terrible results was truly a pleasure to watch, really flexing those skills in horrendous conditions to dominate the race in a way we rarely get to see in Formula E, leaving the two Porsches of Wehrlein and Da Costa miles behind. If only Jaguar could give him something to work with in the dry, he could still be in the fight for P2 in the championship, I reckon. The more interesting thing about Cassidy at the moment though are the rumours regarding a Jaguar exit at the end of the season, a rumour that seems rather believable considering just how poor the squad has looked in the current regulations. Then again, it would just be a roll of the dice once more considering the Gen 4 cars are about to hit the track next season, so this could end up backfiring horribly. It's been a beautiful weekend from Diaz Penske all around, despite heartbreaking mechanical for Maxi Günther in the second race. The man has finally had one of his mega days again during the first race, where truly the Penske 1-2 does not tell the full story at all in my opinion, considering the difference between him and Verne was still pretty sizable with Günther running away at the front while Verne somehow came out on top in a late race brawl for P2. Both excellent in their own right, but Günther clearly the man of the weekend. In general, together with the Porsche duo, Penske is proving to be the most intense inter-team battle for my money, with Günther's near unstoppable peak performance, but his up and down nature going up against the rock-solid Verne. Really a matter of preference who you rate higher between the pair in my opinion. I'm just enjoying to watch Günther in a properly competitive package for the time being. For our short GB3 segment, we do have to talk about the man, the myth, fast Freddie Slater, back for the third round and with a ridiculous last to first victory in the final race, albeit massively aided by a tyre gamble in changing conditions. After raising some questions about his racecraft 2 weeks ago, this week he has managed all the things I've criticized him for, coming from dead last through traffic in every single of the 3 races and keeping it clean while doing so, clean enough to retake P4 in the standings with only 2/3 of the races under his belt. Otherwise, the front end of the field looked rather familiar for the most part, with Alex Ninovic one of the key players, and the likes of Hugo Schwartz, Will McIntyre and a rotating roster of high-tech drivers all in the mix. The high-tech guys are really incredibly hit or miss so far this season, I do have to say. More importantly though, Kanata Lee had what I would call a proper breakout weekend, easily the single best weekend of his career so far, I'd say. Podium in all the 3 races and a convincing win among those, definitely taking steps in the right direction this season after being a slight question mark coming into 2025 for me. Sure, he does have a lot of experience compared to most of his competitors, but this was still an impressive run that should not go unnoticed. Unfortunately, Abby Pulling looked about as anonymous as she did during Zandvoort, not able to replicate her Silverstone form so far. I've still got confidence that she can do it, and I guess having a second Silverstone round later in the season will play into her hands, but we do have to be honest and admit that it isn't looking great so far. Then again, consistency doesn't really appear to be a thing for the guys on the grid either, Alex Ninovic aside of course. The Central European Zone F4 hit the Salzburg ring, and it was still very much the expected Genza show, with Brazilian F4 graduate Gino Trapper and local lad Max Caran sharing the top 2 in all of the races, although typically challenged by Mexican teammates Nicolas Cortes and Javier Herrera as well, even if the latter duo did find itself in a couple of incidents over the weekend. As far as the title battle is concerned, Gino Trapper has a somewhat comfortable lead, especially as second place Max Caran has really not shown this sort of form before, but with another 3 rounds to go, it is not exactly decided yet. The more interesting things are happening outside the Genza hegemony though, if you ask me. For example, David Walter remains the shining star for Outgun Mefa Racing, and I really can't praise the Dane enough for taking the fight to the 4 blue cars time and time again, almost always in position to pick up the pieces if something happens further up the road as well. In my opinion, he is probably the most talented man on the grid. Him having the least experience of the title contenders certainly adds to that impression. Matilda Patz also deserves a shout out, consistently fighting for solid points, and while the raw pace isn't stunning, she did manage to keep it clean in all of the races with some rather chaotic scrapping going on around her. 2 more P5s to her name and driving with some confidence as well. Sure, it might be a weakish grid, but this is still the best we've seen from her so far. And last but not least, Simon Tramnitz has finally managed his first podium of the season, although he remains rather scrappy for the time being, often making gains early in the races only to get shuffled back down the order. If you've been following the channel since last season, you may know I got rather excited over his late season debut, considering he was a complete unknown to me at the time. And while he hasn't quite lived up to what I had hoped for so far, there is clearly some talent in that young Austrian driver, and I do recommend keeping an eye on him as well. IndyNXT at Detroit came with all the expected chaos, despite a surprisingly lengthy green phase for most of the race, partially thanks to wiping out a chunk of the field on lap 1, including Max Taylor and Miles Rowe. With later incidents for Callum Edge, Salvador Di Alba and Lockie Hughes, the results really aren't the most meaningful ever, aside from unrivaled domination by Dennis Hauger of course, but that isn't exactly a surprise anymore. I just like that they're calling him the Norwegian Nightmare. I think it is a fitting nickname. Instead, the biggest takeaway in my opinion was the form Juan Manuel Correa showed up with on the rough street circuit. Not only did he earn a podium by keeping it clean, he was firmly running in the small lead group on merit all day long. A much improved look from his Indianapolis debut. I'll be honest, I don't rate Correa too highly, so I don't know if I'd expect this to be a common occurrence, but at the same time he is one of those heartwarming comeback stories, so at the very least it is a crowd-pleasing individual result, I reckon. Also a shout out to Josh Pearson, not quite able to hang in the lead pack, but still pretty fast and kept it clean for another strong result. He really is having a rock solid season so far, even if I still think he's better in sports cars. Detroit was utter carnage in IndyCar as well. Showcased by Alex Pallou's first DNF of the season, Of course, he isn't even remotely to blame for that one. David Malukas just smashed into him from behind. I do actually want to focus on the AJ Foyt boys for this segment anyway, with both Malukas and Santino Ferrucci having some excellent pace, replicating their form from the Indy 500 and actually ending up with back-to-back P2s. Sure, Ferrucci was massively aided by the aforementioned chaos, but otherwise Malukas looked like he had a good shot to at least get near the podium completely on merit. I very much believe that driver duo is significantly better than the general level of the car allows them to show, and both drivers would do rather well for themselves in the top seat, no doubt in my mind. Yes, I am still upset about how McLaren treated Malukas, in case anyone has been wondering. Looking at the overall entry list, I feel like you can really make a good case for both of them being top 10 drivers of the year so far, even if it is not at all reflected on the results. I know Malukas is P10, but only due to the bullshit extra points from the 500. Either way, this is very much the very best of the next generation of local IndyCar drivers. Andretti finally having a good weekend again was of course also a welcome sight, not just on pace, but actually bringing home the associated results as well, instead of leaving Colton Herta hanging in the pits for once. But I will say, as much as I understand a certain bit of Herta fanboying, I'd say even when ignoring Herta's bad luck, Kyle Kirkwood has looked like the stronger driver so far this season. He isn't just the only driver to win outside of Palou, he has been pretty damn consistent outside of that. Really looks like the best bet for Andretti in the heated P2 battle at the moment. Marcus Ericsson on the other hand remains utterly forgettable outside of his poorly ending glory run last weekend. Comfortable contender for disappointment of the year unfortunately in my book. Shout out to Kiffin Simpson for securing what was comfortably his best result so far in P5. Sure, he might not be the most deserving IndyCar driver, certainly not deserving of a Chip Ganassi seat, but I figured it still deserved an honorable mention. Really waiting for the likes of Siegel and Foster to get some good luck of their own now. And while that was already it for the single seat action, there's of course our quick weekly karting report. The championship battle is heating up in Champions of the Future, round 3 of 5 is done, and in OK Junior it is now Forza Racing driver William Kalija who finds himself in the championship lead after an excellent weekend. A 30 points gap at the top of a 4-way for the title with Tony Kart ace Eiley Kreischen, Ferrari Junior Noah Baglin, and Forza Racing teammate Henry Domain, the latter this time not quite as high up the pecking order to lose some crucial points. 2 rounds to go, so still everything left to play for with another 202 potential points on the table. Williams Jr. Dean Hugendorn had a bit of an off weekend. Much like Domain, he was still alright, but combined with a poor second round of the season, he now finds himself outside of the title favourites. The star of the weekend, though, was neither of the drivers I've mentioned so far. Instead, Dan Alleman doubled up from last weekend by taking his maiden victory in the OK Juniors category, and did so in rather dominant fashion, completing a perfect weekend as far as the points are concerned. I've said it a few times that I do rate the kid quite highly, so I'm glad he is finally converting the potential he has shown into some big results. Let's see if he can keep it up next weekend at the Europeans. Shout out for Danny Babicek, finally taking his first big result during his rookie season in the juniors with a solid run to P8 in the final, and as the highest finishing mini graduate I might add. Another one of those guys where I've just been waiting for them to find their form. Now Daniel Miron Lorente just has to figure out this class too. And in the OK Seniors, Christian Costoya has opened a 50 points gap in the championship thanks to being the only driver out of both categories to win 2 finals and looking pretty untouchable in both. Looking at the championship, Jacopo Martinezzi, Kenzo Craigie, Joe Turney and Tibor Ramicas remain his closest competitors, and I wouldn't count them out just yet, despite Martinezzi and Turney both having a weekend to forget. Turney not even qualifying for the final in fact. Man really isn't having anything near his outstanding 2024 unfortunately. Ramicas may have the least points of the 4, but is arguably the best performing driver in the finals. He just tends to build into the weekends a bit too slowly at times it feels like. And I'd also advise you not to count out the Daniel Calero just yet. Horrific luck so far in the series and still sitting at over 100 points. Plus, he has had a fantastic final here as well and has been one of the key in-form drivers all season long. He does feel just a little bit like Henry the Main of the scenes, if that makes sense. And that was already it for the week. Next week, we'll have a bit of a calmer race week all around, which should give me the perfect opportunity to dive a bit deeper into FRACA and potentially the European Karting Championship as well. But for now, it is your time to drop all of your thoughts and predictions down in the comments so we can get our lovely little discussion going. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.